Hello guys, how are we doing? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have my final spawn guide for Black Ops 6 ranked play until they bring out the new maps, hopefully in Season 1 Reloaded. Hopefully Hacienda's one of them. But today we're going to be focusing on Rewind Control and looking at how you can block, influence and control spawns in this game map mode combo. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say that because this isn't a CDL map, well, it is on the map, but it's not for control. My research hasn't been able to be as extensive as it has been on the other maps. So there's a few things in here that are a little bit more vague than you'd have perhaps seen in my other control guides on Vault and Protocol. So first of all, apologies for that, but unfortunately, I've done extensive research. I've used my own theatre mode to try and analyze the spawns here, but nothing quite beats seeing competitive, proper, like high-level 4v4 in order to, read every single spawn. So first of all, there's a little bit of a disclaimer there that it's not quite up to the standard you're used to for the other spawn guys, and I apologize for that. But yeah, let's crack on with the video. So spawns on the offense side, which is the right-hand side, so just for like ease, this is middle map. You've got burger here, courtyard here, back P2 here. You've got like the graffiti trash cans here, the square trash cans here. And you like P4 back here. So that's just to give you guys a perspective of the map. The rings here locate with the actual spawns they're on. So you've got a spawn in SWAT, back Lions, P4, and then you've got two side street, one a little bit further up and one right in the depths of the spawn. Okay, and that's the 5 main spawns for that side of the map. Obviously, you can't flip, so the game will likely spawn them at every one of these 99.9% of the time. So yeah, the game will spawn them at the safest possible spawn, but it will also reward map control to determine spawns on this map mode combo. Okay, so just bear that in mind when we're going through this. Now, if members of the defense team, so that's the guys who are spawning on this side of the map, if the members of the defense team are pushed up no further than this orange area, rust orange, I'd call it, then the offense team will spawn orange. Okay, because this team on the left essentially have no map control, this team is rewarded with a real close spawn. Okay, so that's fairly self-explanatory. That's quite an easy one to read. Okay, and that's only really likely to happen when the defense team are only running to B, because what you'll see later on in the video, as soon as they get into middle, they don't spawn orange anymore. They spawn further back. Now, this map's changed slightly. It's added a little bit of a red section here, and all that basically indicates is that if the defense team push up a little further through orange and perhaps have a little bit more control of the B control zone or burger, then the game decides that the orange spawn is too close and therefore unsafe to the defense team, and instead spawn them red. Now, note that they still spawn close because the defense team has nobody pushing through middle. Okay, so in order to block these spawns, you literally need someone in middle or in sight of those spawns to block it, which we'll get onto again in a second. So again, you see another bit of an addition to the map, and this is what causes the yellow spawn. So it's essentially the same thing. If the person who's on B pushes up a little bit closer, and therefore they have lines of sight to both of these spawns, the next spawn available is P4. But don't forget, because they've not got control of this middle map, these players here are still being rewarded with closer spawns to both objectives. So yeah, what you'll see next is as soon these players here don't have to push up any further, they can stay pushed up towards like the trash cans or P3. But as soon as they have, the defense team has people sort of situated in mid, towards A, or towards P5, this sort of area, the game no longer spawns the offense side here. It determines there's the best spawn for them is actually blue on the side street. It's just past this. This is the orange truck. There's a little pickup here, and you spawn around that zone if the other team aren't pushed any much further up than that. Okay. Now, what can happen is if someone from this left-hand side here wants to push up even further, that can still mean this team spawns here. But in order for that to happen, it would mean that this right lane is completely left open, which when you're playing ranked play, chances are there's probably someone holding each lane. So how do you spawn them at this final spawn zone, which is probably the worst spawn you would ever find someone spawning on this map, the pink? What that would take is a similar approach to this blue area here. You need people evenly spread across the map and pushed up a little bit, okay? You can have people pushed up the left-hand side past the SWAT van, say up behind one of the police cars, And that'll basically spawn the enemies all the way back here in the depths. Okay, it's a nice way to spawn trap them. The only danger of doing that is if you have someone who gets a little bit over aggressive towards this bottom side street here, and they decide to push around where my cursor is. You can see if they're here, they can see this spawn. So the game's going to struggle to find a good spawn to spawn in there, and it will spawn them in a random location out. So just make sure that if you are pushed at the left, say, okay, someone hold orange car, orange truck, and it will essentially mean the enemy spawn here and pretty much run out into your line of sight. If you're sat on this car, for example, looking down this alley, you're probably going to catch a lot of people running from here across. But obviously, you need someone equally pushed up on this right side a little bit further than they would have from this blue zone to stop them from spawning blue and spawning here. Okay, you need like an even amount of push up the map, and that map control, as I say, rewards you if you're this team that are sat in the pink on defense. It rewards you with that map control by spawning them in the worst spawn possible. So again, the game will spawn them at the closest safe spawn, but will also reward whatever team has more map control. Okay, so you can see here, as soon as when this team has no map control and they've really got little of the map under control, the team on the other side spawn relatively close to the objectives. But as soon as they start to get a little bit more map control, the map opens up a little bit and they now spawn a little bit further away from both objectives. Okay, so let's take some scenarios here. Now, if you ever spawn orange, it simply means the enemy aren't A, otherwise you wouldn't be able to spawn there, and are likely coming off spawn with an emphasis on B. If you spawn red, it means the enemies aren't A again and are coming off spawn towards B, but they're slightly pushed a bit further on than they would have if you spawned orange. So just beware, you've probably got a gunfight happening sooner than you'd expect. Now, if you spawn blue, it essentially means the enemies have mid-map control, but they don't have enough control to push you fully to spawn pink. So you've got a little bit of time. You can probably get to the courtyard uncontested, but beware, there's probably people in a control area or P1, whatever you want to call it, waiting for you to get there. So just be very careful that they might meet you somewhere around this courtyard when you come off spawn. Now, if you happen to spawn pink, it essentially means the enemy has decent map control across the board. Okay, so be very careful when you're pushing up. The safest route when you spawn pink is probably round the left, because otherwise, if they've pushed up the left, you wouldn't have spawned there in the first place. So they do need to be a little bit further backed up here, maybe on the orange truck. I'd suggest is a place they could typically be. So instead of running right and trying to clear your spawn, which you can do if you feel like you're confident enough, if you know there's one person sat on this police car heady, blocking this closer spawn, you can, if you spawn with one other player, you can decide to push around. But that essentially means that, if you want a nice run out of the spawn without taking on a gunfight instantly, running down the side street rather than main street is probably a good idea. Obviously, it depends on what objective is left to capture, obviously. Okay, if B's already done, you've probably got less of a need to kill the person who's playing here, and you can probably freely run around this left to get to A. If A's the only one up, but if B is there, you probably do have to fight the players this side, just so that you can open up this main line of sight and main running route towards B. Now, on the opposite side, we have 4 spawns. Now, these are a little bit more logical. I know on the previous slide here, it looks a little bit bizarre and you're not quite sure what logic. It doesn't seem logical. Normally on control, you push left, they spawn right. You push right, they spawn left. That's sort of the case on this side of Rewind, but it's not always the case, as we just explained. But as I say, this side is a lot simpler. Okay, this side is a lot more logical. And if you're a control grinder, this is probably going to be relatively easy for you to understand. The 4 spawns we have here are back burger, front barber, back radio, sort of in this area here, and then pretty much on P2. Okay, they are the main 4 spawns on this side of the map. And as I say, these spawns are mainly decided by how much weight the enemy team has to whichever side of the map, and that will, we'll get into that just now. So, pink spawn is the main spawn you will see. You'll find yourself spawning at on this side of the map, and you'll probably find the enemy spawning at if they're spawning on that side of the map, because it's the safest spawn. It's right in the depth there, and you can pretty much push up to this area here, and keep them spawning there. Your team does, though. Bear this in mind, your team does have to be relatively balanced up the map, so you would need a player here and a player there to keep the balanced level playing field up the map, which keeps the enemy spawning relatively stable. Now, if, for example, you had a player on this right side, but not on the left, chances of them spawning there are probably still quite high. But say, for example, you had players on this left-hand side, but not on the right, chances are they're going to spawn at one of these 2. Talking of which, now this sort of does display that here. In order for the defense team to spawn blue, the furthest pushed up player on the enemy team should be around these areas. Okay, so whether they're just coming off spawn or whether they're pushed out of spawn and they're pushed up past A and going towards P2, the game will decide that the safest spawn for them to spawn out on this side of the map is blue, back burger. Okay, so they're easily able to defend B, and so it's probably not a good idea to push these areas if you want B. However, if you want A control, then you can see that spawning them here is actually not a bad idea. So getting this control of the map, spawning the enemies there, means that they've got to run across an open street essentially to get the objective they're trying to get. Now, you'll find this zone, this yellow zone. This is what these areas initiate the yellow spawn outside from Barber. This yellow zone is pretty much similar to what we had on the blue. The only difference is we now have a new zone here. So when you add the position of someone on offense pushed up towards B, the game in fact doesn't spawn them here because it deems these players too close. The game then decides to spawn them Barber, as long as no player on this offense team has a line of sight to from Barber. Okay, there's a flipped car there as well as a truck or a lorry, which does defend that line of sight quite well. But if somehow there's a player's got a line of sight to this Barber spawn, they won't spawn it. So just be very careful about that. Now, obviously, this is a really nice position to have them spawning at when you're on offense, and A is the only one to capture, because essentially what it means is if they're not taking routes, they're pretty much going to hit front street every single time. They might run through Laundry, but they're going to probably hit front street or go into Burger. So it leaves them a little bit more readable to this side of the map when you have players positioned in these yellow areas. Now, there are, we haven't touched on this red spawn yet, the spawn at P2. That spawn rarely occurs. It will only really occur if a player on the offense team coming from this side of the map runs all the way around into the spawn, past B, and is in an area which blocks pink, yellow, and blue. Okay, that'll be like, so this is like the game's last resort. Okay, so if you ever find yourself spawning here, essentially means the player's pretty much got into your depths, so you can communicate that to your team, and you can watch out. But it does mean them doing that has made you further at the map, easier to spawn trap from this spawn because how close you can get into their spawn. So yeah, this is probably great. In fact, to be fair, if you're on offense and you've got B to capture, this is probably a really nice place to spawn the enemies because it's quite far away from B. It's probably the furthest spawn from B. So that's probably one way it would be a good idea to have the enemy spawn there. However, if you've only got A left to capture, having them spawn here is probably less ideal than having them spawn here. So pushing up past B, unless you're going all the way around to flank and get some freebies and spawn trap and be really annoying, which is a viable tactic, it's probably not a good idea. So again, let's take some scenarios here. I've already touched on them very slightly, but if you spawn pink, there's nothing too much to worry about. That's pretty much the default spawn across the board. But if you spawn pink and you know for sure there's a player pushed up this left-hand side here, you can almost guarantee that that means there's also a player pushed up this right-hand side here, okay? So, as I say, most of the time you spawn pink, nothing too much to worry about. But if you know for certain a player's pushed up on one side of the map and you still spawn there, it essentially means, if a player's pushed up this right-hand side and you still spawn there, sorry, it also means there's a player pushed up the left-hand side as well, okay? So just be very careful. If you spawn yellow, it means the enemies are pushed up towards P2, where my cursor is, but don't have any team. They don't really, and they have teammates close to B, sort of in this area, in that yellow shaded zone which we saw earlier. If you spawn blue, essentially means the enemies are pushed up towards P2, similar to yellow, but they don't have anyone their side of B. There might be someone further back in spawn, but not close enough to influence this spawn to spawn there. Okay, so that's why you spawn blue. It's the safest spawn, and you've been gifted because of map control. You've got a decent map control over this sort of area of the map. Now, finally, if you find yourself spawning red, as we've already literally just covered, it essentially means enemies in your spawn, so just be careful. Best thing to do here, when you're on offense, is to be very mindful of where your teammates are pushing up. If you press the scoreboard and then R1 or R right bumper, if you're an Xbox controller, I'm not sure what the command is on keyboard, I apologize. You can see the whole minimap, and you can see where your teammates are pushing. You know if they're weighted towards the right, the enemies are going to be spawning left. If they're weighted towards the left, you can guarantee the enemy's going to be spawning in one of these two. Okay, so that's the most basic way to break this spawn system down, at least on this side of Rewind. Again, this isn't my best work for spawn, guys. It's because of limited data, so I do apologize for that. But it will give you an idea. This is as much as I know, and I'm able to spawn trap enemies still on ranked play. So hopefully doing this will enable you to do the same. So get those spawn traps in, share this with your squad, and yeah, hopefully start winning more games on Rewind Control. That'll do from me. Ciao for now.